Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to Daraja Press podcasts. This is Firoz Manji. On this episode, Unsilenced, Poems for Palestine, published by Daraja Press. We join John Portelli and other poets for the launch of our latest book. The event was moderated by Adrian Harewood on May 20th, 2025 in Ottawa, Canada.
Welcome to Carleton University. Welcome to the Low Building, the 7th floor of the Low Building here at Carleton University. My name is Adrian Harewood, and I am a professor in the School of Journalism and Communication here at Carleton University. And I'm honored to be part of this book launch, the book launch for Unsilenced, Poems for Palestine here on the campus. Today we are going to be hearing from some of the poets who have generously gifted of their talents, their imagination in making a contribution to this very fine book. So thank you for this honor, this opportunity to be in fellowship with this community of artists, of poets, of writers, of global citizens, a community of decency and humanity, of solidarity and of resistance. Thank you to the organizers at Daraja Press for allowing us to be in the company of those who value and appreciate the power of words, who use words to build community, to build strength, to share kindness and care and love. For in this moment, for some of us, words have become our only refuge. Words have become the only way for us to express our incessant horror, disgust, disdain, the only way to express our interminable rage, our unending pain. Words are words, our words are insufficient. Words are vulgar, they are inadequate. Words are shit, they are futile, they are everything and nothing. Words expose those whose goal is to extirpate, to eliminate, and to erase. Words name those who suffer and struggle. Words name those who torch and terrorize and murder and maim with glee. Those scallywags who annihilate, immolate, and exterminate with impunity. Words name those who dodge bombs and gunfire so that they can find some solace in safe zones where they are summarily strafed and burned and vaporized. Words name those first responders murdered in cold blood, bulldozed and buried. Words name those angels among us who try to help others each and every day, who share the little they have with the young, emaciated boy, the old woman with Parkinson's, whose sole caregiver, the only one who truly loved her in the world, was blown up in a tent outside Khan Yunis, pieces of whom are now scattered amongst the rubble. Words tell the stories of the ones we left behind, the ones who could not escape, the ones whose genocide is live streamed on our laptops and phones. Words name the maimed and burned, the sick, those who are hungry and thirsty and will be forever traumatized, who miss their mothers, who mourn for their brothers, who grieve for their fathers and cousins, their grandparents and teachers and friends. Words capture our hurt. Words acknowledge our pain, our sorrow, our heartbreak, our disgust, our incredulity, our bewilderment, our depression. Our words are cold comfort. Words are a balm. Words provide. Words help us to remember. Words enable us to endure. Words are words. Words are words. Words are not enough, are not enough. Words. Words are not enough. Are words not enough? So thank you. Thank you for listening. And thank you for, again, giving me this opportunity to be amongst people who recognize what has been going on in Palestine, not just since October 7th, 2023, but for decades longer. So this morning, or this afternoon, because some of you are in a different time zone, we are going to be sharing some of the words, some of our thoughts and feelings with each other in community. And so just to begin, I'm going to ask if John Portelli, one of the editors of the book, can come forward and say a few words and tell us a little bit about the origin story of this project. So John, if I can just pass it on to you.
Thank you, Adrian, for your inspiring introductory remarks, and thank you all for attending, either physically or online. I want to thank the publishers in Malta Horizons, and of course, more importantly at this time, Daraja Press from Quebec in Canada, and all the contributors and all of those who assisted in making this project a reality. There are 50 contributors from different parts of the world, from China to India to Iran to Lebanon, Palestine, Turkey, Malta, Argentina, Canada, and so on. I also thank Carleton University for accepting to host this book launch. Before I make a few remarks, allow me to state, and this is a painful statement on my part, I asked my own university, the University of Toronto, where I have taught for 26 years. I am now a professor emeritus. I asked politely, formally, prudently, twice to get assistance in publicizing this book launch. Not even one single word of reply. Shame on my own institution, who has repeatedly tried to silence both faculty members and students who have openly defended Palestine from the unjust actions taken by the Zionists. And while I say this, I remind my own institution that I have written explicitly about the Holocaust and the problems of the Holocaust, but it seems that Western liberal democracies continue to contribute to the reproduction of colonial injustices. Shame on our Western liberal democracies. In the last year, although I have been struggling with cancer, I managed to publish 3 books on the Palestinian cause. One in Maltese, 40 authors from Malta, and then a book with my very good friend and colleague, poet from Gaza, who has endured for the last 2 years terrible suffering, both psychologically and physically. And from the sale of the first 2 books, I have donated $6,000 to Gaza. The book, this one, the third one, has been inspired, of course, by the terrible injustices that Palestinians have been suffering since 1948. I don't need to remind this audience. I visited Palestine as a volunteer twice. I saw firsthand the injustices. I saw firsthand the sorrow, the pain, and in the last year and a half, whenever I was able to communicate with Ahmed Migdad and his lovely family, I saw and heard their pain, terrible pain. In the last 2 months, I offered again to send some financial contribution, and he said, it is useless. There is nothing here to buy. 3 weeks ago, he gave me some hope. He said, We had a good breakfast today. I asked, what was the breakfast? He said, a tin of small sardines, which we divided among the six of us. I mean, horrible, horrible photos and experiences that he has been sending me. Mahmoud Darwish, as I mentioned in the introduction, noted that poetry should combine the daily experience, whatever it is, and the ontological. And when we combine the daily experiences with the ontological inevitably becomes political. Yes, and this, without any apologies, is a political collection of poetry from these various authors who have different experiences, and yet we all unite in condemning the inhumane actions against Palestinians, and we all call for radical change that is needed, and we strongly condemn the bigotry of Western democracies. Yes, as Adrian has said, words, enough, not enough, surely, absolutely. For me, though, within this context, given my values, my beliefs, words can be a form of activism, an important part of activism, and let us not forget this in the academic world. Thank you.
So at this point, I'd like to ask Feroz Manji to come forward. Feroz is one of the leaders of this project. Of course, he is with Daraja Press. He is a Kenyan, but now resident in Quebec, Canada. And as I mentioned, the publisher of Daraja Press and an adjunct professor at the Institute of African Studies here at Carleton University in Ottawa. He is the recipient of the 2021 Nicolas Cristobal Guillen Batista Lifetime Achievement Award from the Caribbean Philosophical Association. He is co-editor with Sakari Akine of African Awakenings, The Emerging Revolutions, and co-editor with Bill Fletcher of Claim No Easy Victories, The Legacy of Amilcar Cabral. Feroz Manji.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Blair, for your really generous offer to host this event. This is a project which Daraja got involved in directly from contact with John Portelli, who very kindly said that he would like a collaboration between his publishers, Horizons in Malta, and Daraja Press. And it's such a wonderful gift to have been given this opportunity. What I'd like to do is to just, because it's relevant to the title of this book, is to read a very short poem by Yahya Lababidi, a Palestinian poet who we published in a book called Palestine Whale, but this poem is also included in this anthology. And it's called During a Genocide. You will find that during a genocide, most words lose their meaning. Some sound empty, others strange. Apart from unceasing prayer, eloquence takes the form of tears or kindness and solidarity. Even a quiet moan or sighing is preferable to false words or worse, a loud and wounding silence. And I think to have called this anthology Unsilenced, it was really important in this present period. I don't need to recount the awful bloodshed, what is a Holocaust going on in Palestine. I think all of us have been watching this online. But really, to sum up, let me read a short extract from a friend who I hadn't realized was a poet also, lives in Mexico. And he writes, This is a short extract from it. This is no time to despair. It's a time to press our palms to the soil, to dream in the language of our ancestors, and to plant visions no regime can uproot. The cracks are widening, and we say, let them. We are nature, and what we birth will outlive empire. So thank you all for joining us today, and just to remind you that all net income from the sales of this book are being donated to medical aid for Palestinians. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Firoz, and thank you for your work, and thank you for your efforts in producing this fine publication. Professor Nala Abdo is Chancellor's Professor here at Carleton University. Her research deals with the binary relationships between settler colonialism and indigenousness. Using an historical comparative analysis, Professor Abdo's current research focuses on comparing the structure and culture of the state in North America, originally Turtle Island and Israel, originally Palestine, in terms of the role they play in the elimination, genocide of the indigenous peoples of the land. Patrick Wolf's Colonialism Speaks Race is used to delineate the myriad ways in which the state is racialized and racializing. Genocide, elimination, and disappearing on the one hand, and slavery, racism, and incarceration on the other, are highlighted as primary constituents of the settler colonial state. Professor Abdo uses an anti-colonial, anti-imperialist, feminist approach to highlight the deeply gendered nature of colonialism, with a focus on Palestine and Palestinian women. Professor Abdo's research underlines the intersectionality of gender, race, class, and sexuality, and the state. Anti-colonial feminism, it is argued, is the way to challenge and resist settler colonialism. Professor Nala Abdo.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you very much. Let me begin with an acknowledgement of the land that we're sitting on, actually, and we're, presenting on. To begin with, Carleton University sits on the unceded and unsurrendered territories of the Mamiwiniwag. Sorry, I cannot pronounce the name properly. With this acknowledgement, I would like to also thank Firoz for publishing this book and for inviting me to participate in this panel. Thank you, Firoz, and thank you, John Portelli, for putting together this anthology of lyrics, Unsilenced Poems for Palestine, which, as you said correctly, it brings poems and poets from so many countries all over the world: Turkey, Canada, Romania, Nigeria, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, China, Argentina, France, Palestine, and, all the others, not to repeat the same countries. This book is a testament to international solidarity, voicing support for the Palestinian people and their sumud, which is resilience and resistance. This is a loud international voice calling for justice and the right of the Palestinian people to live free from occupation, free from colonialism and settler colonialism. Yes, Adrian, you're absolutely right. Words, words, words remain words. And this is true to almost all governments all over the world, except for a very few, but mainly the Arab world. However, when it comes from individual poets from so many countries all over the world, these words are important. These are important for the Palestinians in Gaza, and these are important for, actually most oppressed people, because I'm sure the same poets would be also writing lyrics to other devastated groups of humanities all over. It was suggested that I read a poem from the collection. There are many beautiful poems in this volume, All poems in this collection are important, and it's not easy, really, to choose one over another. For example, would you like me to start with Rifat al-Arir, the poet and a professor of comparative literature who was targeted and assassinated with his family by the Zionists? A 44-year-old writer and academic who told CNN a few days before his and his family's murder that he and his family had no choice but to remain in the north because they have nowhere else to go. Like all the Palestinians that have been moved from north to south, from south to north, into center, back to north, back to south, as if they're merchandise that you can throw in left and right. Adding, it's an archetypal Palestinian image of a discussion, a debate on should we stay in one room? So if we die together? Or should we stay in separate rooms so at least somebody can live? He said. But I found his incredibly powerful poem, If I Must Die, You Must Live to Tell My Story, too emotional to recite aloud. Lisa Soher Majaj, The Burning in particular, which is a rather long piece about Aaron Bushnell, the 25-year-old US Air Force member who died, actually emulated himself, after setting himself on fire outside the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. on February 25th, 2024. Bushnell ended his life protesting against Israel's military actions in Gaza. And he had previously expressed views critical of the Israeli government and the war in Gaza. But I am sure we all still have his image in our heads, so I'm not going to read that poem. I will instead read a relatively lighter, yet a powerful prediction of Israel's, or more correctly, Zionist lies and fabrications by an anti-Zionist Jewish author, Lil Bloom. That was my choice. Trigger warning, she writes, to the woman who came to the door asking that we take down our End the Occupation Free Palestine sign because she was triggered. We know this lie, right? Warning, this poem might trigger you because when I say Free Palestine, you hear kill the Jews. Because when I say Nakba, you hear Kristallnacht. Because when I say stop the genocide, you hear support Hamas. Because my sympathy for Gazans makes you uncomfortable. Because you think being uncomfortable is the same as being in danger. Warning, the kafiyah that this poem is wrapped in might trigger you, might make you uncomfortable. Because when the poem sees children in Gaza burning, you only see Jewish children burning. Because this kafiyah asks you to be aware of others, to care about others. Warning, this poem might trigger you because you believe the conflict started October 7th conflict. Because you know your army is the most moral. Israel is still saying that. Because you see genocide as self-defense. And besides, the only genocide ever was the genocide of your people. Yes, my people, she's saying. And you'd rather not have your convictions challenged because you planted a tree in Israel every 2 Bishvat. Yani every second in Shvat, in February. Because you didn't know that trees were planted to hide bulldozed Palestinian villages. Because you knew it was your land given to you by the British, the UN, and God, even though it was never theirs to give. This poem might trigger you because you want 2 million Gazans to disappear, and killing them one by one is too slow and makes you uncomfortable. This issue of making Israelis or Zionists, I believe most Israelis have become Zionists or too scared to feel what they truly think, is very familiar to us all here in the West. We are familiar with the silencing taking place on North American and most European campuses, where students and faculty alike are targeted for criticizing the genocidal state, for criticizing the settler colonial state of Israel, which survives on the elimination of the indigenous Palestinian people. I was placed under the university administration's potential investigation because a colleague felt uncomfortable with my criticism of the state of Israel. I say potential because after several months of tribulations, the colleague discovered they were wrong and withdrew their claim. So I was not investigated. Nonetheless, the whole process is because that colleague felt uncomfortable with my words. Somehow this lack of comfort makes them feel they are in danger, whereas the true danger is befalling Palestinians every single minute and second there, and not Jews living in Canada or Israelis living in Canada or the Israeli society at large. The poem I read covers a large part of the Israeli or Zionist genocide in Gaza. It presents one Jewish critical voice on Israel's Hasbara propaganda, its lies and fabrications to cover up genocide. We all know the genocide today reaching its 660 days is but a continuation of the genocide of the Palestinians, which began in 1948, in what we refer to as the Nakba, where close to 750,000 Palestinians were kicked out from their homes and lands and became refugees, their lands confiscated, property and homes looted and occupied, over 500 villages destroyed, and every corner in this land was made to vanish and was renamed to fit the Zionist Israeli narrative. This war is the 15th being waged against the Gaza Strip by Israel's settler colonial state. In this genocide, Israel has killed tens of thousands of people, estimated by the Lancet at close to 200,000 people. Over 18,000 children have been killed, an estimated 35 children per day. It killed more than 1,400 health workers, doctors, nurses, and other health workers. This includes the killing of 2 doctors, Ahmed Maqadmi and his mother, both doctors at Al-Shifa Hospital, together with over 400 people. As his colleague, Ghassan Abu Sitta, in an interview with Democracy Now! Explains, according to Abu Sitta, Maqadmi and his mother had been executed by the Israeli army while trying to escape Al-Shifa Hospital. Abu Sitta blamed the Western journalists who perpetuated the narrative that militarized the hospital has a justifiable and acceptable target. Western journalists, we know, have almost all towed the line of the Zionist journalists and functioned as Israel's mouthpiece. Unfortunately, Palestinians and others living in the so-called democratic West strived hard to find alternative journalism that dared to tell the truth about the genocide. They're still rare. We remember the story of orthopedic surgeon Adnan al-Bursh, who refused to leave the hospital, more than one, Al-Shifa, Al-Auda, and more, when Israel ordered the evacuation of at least 3 hospitals and bulldozed them. He was taken to Sdei Timan in the Naqab. This is a hilarious prison of torture and death. He was tortured severely and for 10 consecutive days was raped and then taken to Ofar prison, naked from below the belly and thrown there. Unable to stand on his feet, some inmates dragged him inside, but he was dead. There are many stories of Palestinians tortured and murdered in Israeli prisons. As a settler colonial state, Israel turned indigenous Palestinians into its enemy and a threat to its security. Israel securitized every single thing in Gaza to achieve its targeted genocide. It securitized the targeted doctors, nurses, and other medical staff and murdered them, such as the killing of 15 health workers. You probably all have heard about them. And the burying of the workers and their ambulances under the rubble so it can hide the crime. It securitized journalists and murdered them. It securitized academics and students and killed many of them. And throughout, it turned Palestinian children, including infants, into security threats and targeted them for murder. By the way, this is not strange to any settler colonial state in the world, but Israel is doing it in front of our eyes in the 21st century. In addition, Israel destroyed people's workspace. It bulldozed hospitals, schools, universities, churches, and mosques. It destroyed Gaza infrastructure, its water sources and pipes, its electricity and all. I know that John Portelli said there is no need to go through that history, but sometimes I feel that going back through that history with certain personal stories, certain simple incidents is important for us to keep that story alive, to keep it as it is the story of today and not yesterday. As a Palestinian from that state, I would not be surprised to learn that if the state succeeds in expelling our sisters and brothers from the occupied territories of 1967, which Israel is trying to do right now, Israel will start to expel 1948 Palestinians. That is 1.5, 1.6 million Palestinians living in Israel right now. Those who, like the rest of their people, will also be expelled. Israel can only exist if it eliminates all Palestinians. I think I'm going to stop here, and thank you very much all for listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nala, for your powerful words and also your recitation of that fine poem. Layla Marshy's father was exiled from Galilee in 1948, eventually landing in Canada. He was never able to return. During the first Intifada, Layla worked for the Palestinian Mental Health Association in Cairo and in Gaza, and Medical Aid for Palestine in Montreal. In 2011, she founded Friends of Hutchison, a groundbreaking community group that brings Hasidic and non-Hasidic neighbors together in dialogue. She's published fiction and journalism in media in Canada and the United States. Her first novel, The Philistine, was published in 2018 and published in France in 2021. And My Thievery of the People was published this year in 2025. Please welcome Layla Marshy.
Thank you very much, Adrian. That was a very powerful intro, I want to say, that you did at the beginning. And thank you, Feroz and Daraja Press, and of course, John, for putting this book together. I'm very happy to be part of it. Adrian, I thought your intro, it's been kind of percolating in my head since the power and the impotence of words. I think all of us who do write or try to hits us every day. And what's interesting about Gaza is the amount of writing that has come out of it, the number of journalists and poets and writers whose names have become more mainstream, some of whom, of course, tragically, monstrously have died in the past 2 years, were killed. But I think this opening up of the poetry of Palestine has been an unexpected beauty. And I'm grateful to be in whatever which way part of it. John was gracious enough to include 3 poems. I'm just going to read one. And it's something also that has been very important to me throughout. It's just, you know, especially those, I mean, I grew up in Canada in communities where there are lots of Jews, and the Jewish culture and presence is very strong. And just navigating this has had interesting things about it. Anyways, I can't even explain it, so I'll read the poem. It's called Kinship. I finally know why I feel a kinship with the Jews. They have made me one of them. My Palestinian family live where they are not wanted. My father was exiled for no reason other than all of a sudden what was his was not. Just like the Jews, we wear our ethnicity on a piece of cloth, and an entire country has decided we need to be rounded up and herded out. And just like the Jews, the walls built to crush us can barely contain us. And now, just like the Jews, we are being blamed and vilified and hounded and hunted and exterminated. For centuries, the Jews were alone in the world. Lucky for them, they have made us in their image. That's all. Thank you. And thank you, Lil Bloom. And your poem, I mean, the fact that Nahla read your poem, it seemed unexpected, but I thought that was really interesting. And I thought it was nice in the end to have, you know, a Palestinian woman read your poem. And anyways, this is a great event. I'm happy to hear and listen to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Leila. Leila, I'm just wondering if you do me the honor of allowing me to ask you a few questions about that poem of yours, Kinship. Perhaps you can just tell us about the journey of Kinship. How did it begin? And tell us about how you went about composing it.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I grew up, we were the only Arabs in our little suburban neighborhood, and there was a lot of Jews. And I would pretend I was Jewish almost my whole childhood. And, you know, our father was from a country nobody understood or heard of. And I remember at one point friends discovering something, I don't even know what it was. I didn't know what Passover was, and that was a shock. And I just sort of allowed it to happen that I was taken for being Jewish. And then, you know, my involvement in Palestinian issues has grown over the last couple of decades. But a few years ago, I started Friends of Hutchinson because I live in a neighborhood here in Montreal that's very Hasidic. And the Hasidim were kind of targeted and discriminated against in a way that I recognized. And I think it was my experience in Palestine that made me empathize with them. And we formed a dialogue group. And then I ended up being campaign manager for the one and only Hasidic woman to ever hold political office, and now who's a very close friend. And my immersion in the Hasidic community, I never felt I was Jewish or tried to be when I was with them, but I did feel that my Palestinianness and my experience made me understand them. I can't say they ever understood me, but it didn't matter because I was there as their neighbor. And then shortly after October 7th, I don't know if any of you remember, shortly after 9/11, sales of the Quran went up. There was this surge. I think when people are in a crisis, there's a kind of shaking and a surge where you try to understand what happened. And there was a few weeks before Bush decided to bomb the hell out of the Middle East, but there's a few weeks where it felt like there's going to be a shift in understanding why the US is being targeted like this. And I felt the same thing after October 7th, where, you know, maybe people will understand what it feels like to be Palestinian, what it feels like to be in Gaza, what it feels like to be hounded and hunted. And that didn't last very long. But I think, you know, I think the Jews who are perpetuating this kind of brutal Zionism and occupation have no idea what they're doing. I mean, they do and they don't. And it's ironic that they are doing, I mean, their trauma of World War II has been completely unprocessed. And it's ironic that they are perpetuating, and, you know, a beaten and abused and traumatized child often grows up to beat and abuse and traumatize. And it's this cycle that they're playing out. And now they're creating, you know, Palestinians in their image, in the image of their persecutor, they think we're Nazis, and also in the image of creating victims. It's complex. And I am far from understanding it or even articulating it properly.
You said that quite brilliantly, and I wanted to ask you though. You were saying that you feel as if they know, but they don't know. They do and they don't know. So why do you think they don't know, or what is it that they don't understand?
Well, when you look at people like Smotrich and Ben Gvir, I mean, they feel to me like on an emotional level, they're operating out of their reptilian brains, you know, and they are European Jews. They are not Iraqi Jews, you know, they are not Lebanese Jews, or they are not Jews who grew up in the Middle East and in their bones know that there used to be a place for them in the Middle East. They are European Jews that have a millennia of persecution under their skins. And I think they are acting out of a sense of panic, a sense of fear, a sense of finally we are going to be the warriors that we needed to be in World War II. Finally, we are going to fight back. Finally, we are going to smite these people, but they don't understand, and it's their education is so bereft. They don't understand that they are occupiers, that they are brutalizers, and that they have been, you know, the arm of colonizers since the 30s. And there's so much disconnect. I mean, you see settlers and you see, you know, they are fighting the Holocaust to me when I see the rabid fear and violence of Jews of Israel and Jews here who are very hard Zionists. To me, they are fighting the Holocaust still. And that is where their education has failed them. And that is where their history books have failed them and their efforts to understand have failed them. I mean, when I was hanging out a lot with the Hasidim, I mean, they have no idea. I mean, that's an extreme example of a very blinkered education. But for a Jew to work their way out of this education, maybe Lil can speak to this, it's a lot of work. I have a lot of Jewish friends who have sacrificed so much to be able to see, let alone stand on the side of Palestinians, family, community. You know, you have to deprogram.
Have you had an opportunity to share your poetry with your Hasidic neighbors?
No, we're not talking since October 7th. I've made several attempts and it's been I'm kind of grieving some of my friendships because it's like they shifted into that gear of survival and they cannot understand or see what's happening. They only see the Arabs are trying to eradicate them. That is what they see.
So if you had the opportunity to sit down and break bread with your Hasidic neighbors and talk about this poem, talk about your own feelings and thoughts, what would you want to convey to them?
That I love them. You know, you start from there. I mean, I've always felt neighborly and allied. There's an allyship and that, you know, we need to approach each other more openly and take emotional risks and just start. I mean, yeah, that's all I'd say. And let's talk and let's have some good food.
Some people listening to you are going to find what you just said quite extraordinary, right? The fact that your heart is open enough to recognize the humanity of the other and recognize the humanity of people who might not fully recognize your own humanity. How do you do that?
I mean, I also empathize and I'm open to Hamas. I mean, if I was living in Gaza, I understand Hamas. You know, I understand wanting to take up arms and, you know, MacGyver little flying things and flying over your, you know, the wall. I mean, it's not like, you know, Nelson Mandela never renounced violence. And the IRA, you know, the problem is not Arab violence. The problem is occupation. At the end of the day, we are all citizens, and I think we have obligations to each other. And those obligations are to be humane and to reach out. And there are lines, you know, there are lines. And I think Gaza has been behind a line. And I don't condemn one thing that Palestinians have done to cross those lines. But I'm not living in that circumstance. And I think I have the privilege maybe to be magnanimous on some level. Emotionally, of course, I feel enormous rage. But to get back to the Hasidim, they are my neighbors. And as a citizen, I have an obligation to protect and reach out and dialogue with neighbors. If they were lobbing bombs and sending soldiers, my reaction would be different. But once peace is achieved, and peace is justice, it's not just peace, then one can resume. I mean, it's very complex.
Well, Leila, I think I can speak on behalf of the people here in the room in the Low building at Carleton University, and for those people online, just saying that it was a privilege to hear you, and thanks so much for sharing your poem and sharing your thoughts and sharing your own journey with us. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Adrian. Thanks, everyone.
Can I add just to complement Layla's talk about they know and they don't know? Ben Gvir, for example, is an Arab. He's not, European. He comes from Iraq. And many in the Israeli army are also from Arab countries. So they do know, and they do know that they're killing Arabs, and they don't care. Now, it's, as you said, it is a complex question, because you also need to know how does, an 18-year-old Israeli Jewish boy get to be so hatred, full of hatred to the Palestinians. You know that by looking at the curriculum. You know that by looking at what do they learn. And throughout the schooling system, what Jewish students learn, totally different than what Palestinians learn, all the Palestinian citizens who live with them, because Jewish students learn to hate Arabs, learn that this is a Jewish state, learn that there is no spot or space for Palestinians, knows that Palestinians are terrorists, and this is what they learn. So it's easy when you're 18 or 19, take the gun and shoot, the Arab, even in a close range. So this is one of the issues that one needs to really grapple with. What kind of education of culture that Israel has produced over these 77 years in order to turn one community so vicious as we're seeing now, and the other community, to consider it as animals, not human beings, and that they all need to be killed.
Thank you so much, Nala. Thank you for that.
I think there's a danger in only looking at Israelis. This is an empire struggle. This is something that Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Europe, America, they are the actors in this. There may be a decentralized despotism awarded to the Israeli government, but this is America absolutely central in this. And I think we cannot talk about the emergence of this violent culture without equating it with the impunity internationally that is being given, which encourages that kind of killing and that kind of behavior. So I think we have to be careful to say, look, this is an imperial struggle. This is like what happened in Canada, is a colonizing project, and it is financed by, armed by the Americans, Europe, and the rest of the Five Eyes, all of which have colonial histories of genocide. And so it's not surprising, and I think we should not take them off the hook. You're listening to the Daraja Press podcast. Daraja is the Kiswahili word for bridge. As its name suggests, Daraja Press seeks to build bridges, especially bridges of solidarity between and amongst movements, intellectuals, and those engaged in struggles for a just world. Check out our other episodes, books, and more at darajapress.com. So now let's get back to the show.
Nibal Khalil is a Palestinian academic and a professor of anthropology who has a PhD in social and cultural anthropology from Charles University in Prague. She has held various academic and research roles at Charles University's Faculty of Philosophy and has consulted widely on gender issues, women's empowerment, and youth leadership, including her work with asylum services in Belgium. She serves at Al-Quds University in Palestine as Dean of Scientific Research and as an advisor of the Higher Council for Youth and Sports in Palestine. Currently, Dr. Khalil is a professor and researcher at Birzeit University. Professor Khalil.
Thank you. Thank you, Firuze. And thank you, Joan, for this amazingly done work for raising the voices of Palestinians worldwide with these, all my colleagues here. You are amazing. Actually, maybe a few words about I am one of the people who are living in this land in Palestine, and I'm experiencing what you are thinking about its virtuality in perspective. But in my case, I'm living this incidents every day. So lately I was podcasting actually about something else, not political issues in Gaza, but I went through the social and psychological terrifying conditions that are now under the genocide. And this will allow me not only to say something poetry-wise, but also to dig deep on how the genocide affected the people in there socially, psychologically, and furthermore, to ask about their identification, about their identity, and how this genocide turned the youth and the people in Gaza to ask their identity nowadays, and where this will lead them. These are the questions came up after these lectures and podcasting and workshops. So going back to Leila, I agree with Nahla about Jews. They know, and I agree. The curriculum here is really terrific. It is just like formulating the children on how to act as an enemy for any other people who are not Jews. So from there, you can raise many people with this mentality. They don't want to listen to the truth. They have been educated to just not to listen, not to go to the other end and see the other story. So that's why they are strictly into hatred of Arabs and Palestinians. And that's why by the end, they shoot, they do all of this without any mercy. So going back to poetry, this one is sad, and I don't want to put you in sadness, but okay. Death portrait. We hang our children by a rope on the wall of the sky. A family portrait snapped before their dispatch. It's crucial, you see, that the fragments gather in a single bag, a luxury to have the bag hold one whole body. And if the world becomes too tight for us, one bag for the whole family on the stage will suffice, enough for the photographer to capture his shots, waiting patiently for everyone to take their turn. No thousand joys to come could ever erase this image. Memoir of war. I press my heart beneath the feet of war, where the clay jars fell to the brim. I piled them high in my grandmother's storeroom, she who passed 40 years ago. I inspect the cracked cellars, and when the unexpected guest arrives, I rush to the storeroom, choosing for him a cup brimming with memories. I offer him a rosy fragment of the past, but he returns the cup to the lone coffee table by the roadside, executing himself in hassle, seeking a moment's rest before meeting his mother. Then he leaves, and I dissolve sorrow into the throat of the house. All those whose memories I stored in my grandmother's storeroom were devoured by war. Last one. My orphan country. My orphan country living in the refuge. Today, I ordered from a tailor a needle to fix the patches of sadness on our bodies. He told me the needle got lost under the rubble. I asked the hairdresser for a brush to calm destruction of my country. He said an old woman borrowed it before she died, so it went with her. My country's face is covered with the dust of broken concrete. So I went to the herbalist to buy a cure for oppression. He said, it is out of the recipe. All the women voted to give birth to men over the graves of their fathers. And I asked of a perfume I can smell whenever I am unconscious. He said, it's all in the bags buried in the cemetery. The country is an orphan. My daughter, wear your black forever. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nabil. That last poem, My Orphan Country, it's a devastating, gut-wrenching poem. It's a poem that's deeply felt. You know, today I ordered from a tailor a needle to fix the patches of sadness on our bodies. He told me the needle got lost under the rubble. I asked the hairdresser for a brush to comb destruction of my country. I wanted to ask you, Nabil, about despair and how you manage.
Well, I am one of all of these people. And how I manage, I will tell you the truth. What I practice with my students, I give rehabilitation, psychological rehabilitation, about talking about what's happening in here, just to give us and to give them a hope that something will come up in the future that will light this country again. And in this way, I feel that I manage living, and I let others, as my students, as my friends, also to go through this in a way that will see the hope and the light is coming up. Yes.
So if I can ask you this question, what is poetry for you?
It's a refuge. I can go there and I can take off all the things that I wanted to say like loudly, and I put it there, and I'm light.
And for you, do you have many opportunities to share this poetry with others, in community with others?
Yeah, I have. In my community here, they accept it, and of course, they like it. And this opportunity to raise the voice now of poetry of mine within your community now today, and thank you, John, for this. It's something different. Is more loud. Yeah.
Well, Nabil, we thank you for speaking loudly.
You're welcome.
Thank you. John Portelli is originally from Malta. He is a professor emeritus in the Department of Social Justice Education at the University of Toronto. He's taught in Canadian universities since 1982. In addition to writing 11 academic books, he's published 10 collections of poetry. His work has been translated into Italian, Romanian, Greek, Farsi, Arabic, Korean, English, Spanish, Portuguese, and Polish. John Portelli.
Thank you, Adrian, again. I will read one poem. As I said, I have been, whenever there is an opportunity to communicate with my good friend poet from Gaza, Ahmed Migdad, and this is one of our continuous conversation through poetry. So this is inspired with my conversations with Ahmed. It's entitled You Swallow Your Anger. Today, like yesterday and always, you swallow the anger accumulated over years of exile in your homeland. You lose sense of time, constantly surrounded by the dead, and the smell reminds me of the smoke of Auschwitz. Bodies are bodies. After that, differences do not matter. Sobbing and pity are of no worth. Suddenly, as always, the ground shook, the tent flapping frantically with every wind, searching for a spot without graves, but to no avail. Your destiny is too harsh. Even the ground has gotten used to the stain of children slaughtered on the boiling sand. With a lump in your throat, you gather the lonely shoe of your daughter, not to place it in the museum in Auschwitz, but so her siblings may remember her if they are lucky enough to live another hour. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Adrian. And once again, I thank all the contributors. Initially, when I started this idea of editing this book, I thought I may have 10, maybe 12 contributors. It grew very surprisingly and optimistically to 50 people, and it has given me a lot of courage. Thank you to all of you.
Well, John, thank you for planting the tree, and these poets and poems are your leaves. So thank you for this. We do appreciate it.
It's a communal project, so thank you very much.
Omar Sabag is a very widely published poet, writer, and critic from the UK and Lebanon. His poetry and prose have appeared in many prestigious venues. For Echo is his sixth poetry collection with Cinnamon Press, released in the spring of 2024. Omar has published 2 novellas and much short fiction too, some of it prize-winning. Why Not's Short Fictions was published in 2023 with Licorice Fish Books. His latest work, Night Settles Upon the City, a collection of poetry out of contemporary Beirut, is published with Daraja Press in November 2024. Omar holds a PhD in English literature from KCL. He has taught in several universities and currently teaches at the Lebanese American University. Please welcome Omar Sabag.
Hello, everyone. First, just want to say it's a privilege and an honor to be included in this anthology and to be participating in this launch event. Thanks, obviously, to John for being the guiding force behind this collection, and to Firoz at Daraja Press for being unfailingly, indefatigably courageous. And thank you, Adrian. Nice to meet you. It's the first time I think we've met, so thank you for this opportunity. I'm going to read a couple of shortish poems from my contribution to the book. The first one is titled Christmas 2023, and as may be obvious, it was written, the 2 months from October 7th into the time of the genocide. Christmas 2023. There are no more saints inside the morning air, and no more wizened scholars either. Shame walks the wind between us, and its gusts speak in tongues of abandonment, of lovelessness. God goes forth to die another day, the daylight falls, shedding its leaves of golden brightness, like a snake, its aged skin. We are being untaught again, our minds blanketed, raised, as the innocent fall beneath the weight, like final strangers of eerie gifts. This is no season of hope, of green, of white, of sap-like uplift. The dying, even more than the massive dead sent from life, still living, and the figurations of sense, build from a zero brick, arcs thin as wafts of saddened mint in a world without flower. The only growth we have, dissent. The second one I want to read is called Lost Sundays. And like the previous poem, it indicates by its title when it was written. It was written on a Sunday morning. I was in Dubai. I used to live in Dubai like last year, but I've moved to Beirut, obviously. So this is called Lost Sundays. I do not pray or keep the keep that others may. The only thing I see to be hallowed are high and jagged walls. In this, I am like most of the world I know. So that Sunday means very little to me, and no martyr rives the way forward, splitting wide-lipped seas or walking upon them. And the emanating rays of the morning sun and the chill breeze mean nothing special, apart from nothing. To the west of me a nation burns, hoodwinked and suffering and seized by the shame of never having had its turn, even to fail desperately at being a nation. Those are two of my poems in the book. Thank you for the opportunity to partake in the collection and to read today.
Thank you so much, Omar. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more. We know that it was written on a Sunday, but maybe you can tell us a little bit more about Lost Sundays. Where did the poem come from?
Well, Sunday is meant to be the day of meaning, right? The day of rest, where it's no longer empirical existence that comes into existence, but the value or the meaning of that existence. So Sunday for me is like, I suppose, a haven or a kind of utopian image. And the fact that, the poem's about obviously loss and as it ends, never having had the chance to even to fail at being a nation. And so it was just an image that occurred to me to kind of guide me as I wrote those thoughts out in that verse. Apart from that, no, it was just an inkling I had on a Sunday morning, and I want to write about Gaza.
This is a question that I know annoys poets because you're just a poet. You just write what you write. But I'm curious. Do you think about your audience when you're writing? Do you think about how what you're writing might be interpreted?
No, not interpreted, but I do think about the audience as a writer when I write poetry, even when I write prose, actually. Musicality, even it doesn't have to be like very kind of overt musicality, but musicality and tonality are central to how I work as a writer. And that is necessary, I mean, as in the word attitude, that's kind of how I expect or predict I'll be heard off the page or in person is essential to how I work as a writer. So I want to move people, obviously, or alert them or make them think about something they haven't thought before. So yes, in a way, regarding Gaza in particular, but more generally speaking, as a writer, I'm always aware of my audience. Not tailoring content towards the audience, but aware that what I do is not something which is essentially private, but actually has to have a readership or an audience. So I want to obviously, make an impact on the reader or on the audience. So they're always there in the back of my mind. And that's whether it's urgent with because most of my work in poetry over the last, 20 years has been confessional and lyrical. And since October, I've found an objective cause that kind of redeemed the self-involvement of myself as a writer. And I was able to write about something that really mattered, unlike my own petty concerns. So having an audience is there always, but also when it matters this much, yeah, it's always in the back of my mind.
And I think you've alluded to it, but I'm wondering if you could go even deeper. Like, what's the kind of work that you want your poems to do?
Well, I want them to be sincere, and I want them to be eloquent and elegant. And that's a failing, perhaps, because putting a premium on aesthetics might seem callous, given, suffering that has nothing elegant or eloquent about it. And it's a worry I've always had because I tend to write in kind of harmonious ways, Apollonic ways, and that often is seen as, structurally or formally kind of incongruent with a reality which is far from harmonious. But I can't help it. So what I try to do is I try to redeem any kind of aesthetic kind of or aestheticism in my writing by making any skill I may have as a writer serve something worthwhile. And I think it can be looked at both ways. I think, if you are concerned about poetry being beautiful, it's important as a poet, but there's a risk there that you're kind of putting a premium on aesthetics over the fact of the matter, which is far from beautiful.
What it suggests to me, though, Omar, is that for you, poetry is not superfluous. My sense is that you want your poetry to last. Like when you're creating beauty, you're not just creating it for the moment. It's not something that can be used and disposed of quickly. This is something that will last beyond perhaps our lifetime. That you're kind of shooting for the stars.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's very true, actually. Yeah. I tend to write quite quickly and impulsively. I get an urge, and I start writing, and then it becomes a poem or it doesn't. But the idea that one might make will last is obviously, yeah, it's a nice idea, and it's something that I think it drives a lot of writers, whether they're writing about overtly political causes or just about other things. So I mean, it's like a double-edged sword. Sometimes I feel guilty writing, let's say, what we might call a beautiful poem about such an unbeautiful reality. But at the same time, if you want people to read and therefore be aware of what you're talking about, it's always good to make an effort to make it somehow memorable. So it's a double-edged sword. That question of how one chooses to write about horror and abjection and affliction that is actually, as many people have said today, far beyond any meaningful articulation. I mean, you started this session with your recitation about words and the poles of words being powerful and meaningful, but also the idea that words are just words, and that people who are suffering what they're suffering in Gaza and elsewhere, it's not a different language. It's just not. It's not part of language. It's something which is I can't imagine, and I try to empathize, and I want to, but I don't let myself fall into the trap of thinking that I could actually really, understand what it would be like to be there, because I can't, full stop. And, we all suffer in life, we all have our sufferings, but and everyone says, suffering is relative and all that stuff. And that's true, it is relative, but there's an absolute line beneath which is absolute. And something like Gaza will indicate that. I always worry about feeling like I'm trying to empathize with something which actually I can't really empathize with because I live comparatively a privileged life. So,
Omar, thank you so much.
thanks.
Sharani Rajapaksa is an internationally published and award-winning poet and short story writer from Sri Lanka. She's won the Ossi di Seppia Award in Italy, the Kindle Book Award for Poetry, USA, and the Boao International Poetry Award in China, and is a thrice recipient of the State Literary Awards for Short Stories, Sri Lanka, in addition to numerous other awards. Rajapaksa's work appears in many journals and anthologies around the world, including in Dovetails, Buddhist Poetry, Litro, Lynette's Wings, and Bosphorus Review. Her work has been translated into Spanish, Urdu, Hindi, Chinese, and French. Rajapaksa read for a BA in English Literature from the University of Kelaniya in Sri Lanka and has an MA in International Relations from JNU, India. Please welcome Sharani Rajapaksa.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here. Thank you, Adrian. I have to thank John for including my poetry in this wonderful anthology. He's used 3 of my poems, but I'll be only reading 1. Thank you also to Feroz for publishing this wonderful anthology. I'll read the poem called On the Beach. I wrote this several years back, and this was the, I wrote it because of when I think it was 2013, when the Israelis were bombing some part of Gaza, and there were children on the beach, and they were dying, and they were considered as terrorists. And that struck me as really a horrible thing to happen. And it was one of the times that I thought, this is terrible. And this is the poem about that. It's called On the Beach. And when the smoke cleared, they saw the child lying on the sand like a piece of paper, crumpled and thrown into the trash. Salt winds ruffled his hair. The waters beyond beckoned. Come into me, come into me. The waves whispered, running in and out, waiting for him to get up and run. Run like he was doing before he fell. Run like he wanted to race into her cool embrace. Run like it was the better place to be. But his feet had stopped moving. His eyes stopped seeing. He no longer heard the voices of the sea, sounds of gulls in the air. The roar of guns silenced inside his head forever. And as they ran towards him, their child, they saw the earth stick out her tongue and begin to sip him in. Slowly, slowly, she drank him in, drop by little drop of red, quenching the earth. And around him lay the others, stopped in play, feeding the earth, staring up, up. And as the cry rose from their throats, and they beat their breasts in vain, falling to the ground to ask what mad God would do such to his sons, the skies started to howl anew as madness rained down once again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sharani. I'm not sure if you could hear it from where you are, but there was a collective, almost kind of gasp at the end of that poem of yours here in the Low Building at Carleton University. And I think everyone here would like to know a little bit more about the origin story of your poem. Could you tell us about it?
Yeah, I think it was 2013 when the Israelis were bombing Gaza, and there was this story about, it was in the news about children playing in the sand on the beach and how they were killed. And, it was such a horrendous, useless kind of thing to happen, to bomb children and, innocent children who were at play. And this was something, I don't know what kind of mentality people have to, justify the death of, murdering children. And it was something that, I just had to write about it. And this was published previously. And that image that I saw on TV, of what had happened, it still haunts me. It's just terrible things to happen.
You are, of course, an artist. You are, of course, very familiar with what has gone on in Sri Lanka over the last 40, 50 years, where you've seen much violence and much death. And I'm just curious, when you think about your role as a poet, what do you see it as being?
It's to tell what we have to see. What we see. The role is different from that of a journalist, I think, because a journalist would just report the facts and then that would be it. Whereas as a poet, we can go deeper and talk about the kind of suffering people go through. And this is not really usually talked about by journalists. They just come, they report on something. If they see a person, suffering, they will just mention that that person is suffering. Whereas as a poet, we can try to empathize with them and try to talk about how how much they suffer, how much they feel about something, and try to bring out their inner thoughts. And when you live through a conflict, and as I did, I grew up, every day there were bombs going out, the terrorists were attacking us all the time. And, and you hear the stories, what happens in the press. It is a different thing, whereas because the international press sees a different version of what was happening. And, it's always, and when I see what's happening in Palestine, it's similar, to what we went through. The perpetrators they're applauded. Similarly, in Sri Lanka, the terrorists were, they're being protected by, by countries that, support them. And it's the colonial mentality, the colonialism that's come back. And, they are just using people to justify whatever it is they want. And that was what was happening even in Sri Lanka. So it's, it's very sad when you see so much of suffering. And as poets, when we try to write about what we see, what we experience, and also try to write about what others experience, and try to give life to people who can't speak and who aren't able to say things. So I think that's that role as a poet. It's a very powerful and very strong, and it's a big responsibility, I think.
Well, Sharani, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Our next poet is, she's someone that I know quite well. Hyacinth Harewood writes essays, poems, aphorisms, and songs to make it through the day. Over the years, some of these have appeared in short-lived publications like Contrast, a Toronto weekly national Black community newspaper, The Black Eye, an Ottawa, Montreal literary magazine, and Donna Magazine, a Toronto online publication. She's also read or performed a few of her pieces to small groups at Algonquin College, a community college here in Ottawa, Carleton University, Centrepoint Theatre, and Ottawa City Hall. Now retired from a paid workforce career of post-secondary teaching, communications consulting, and federal public administration, she reads, writes, talks, and sings to herself and her small, wonderful circle, and sometimes, makes good food for her grandchildren. Hyacinth Harewood.
Thanks, Adrian. I think I know you too. Yeah. Originally, I was planning to use another poem, but that's too indulgent of me in the context. So I went back to a poem that I wrote while I was teaching at Algonquin. And I read it first just to a group of teachers, a group of us. We'd get together at lunchtime and listen to bits of literature. So this particular poem, I think, expresses sort of something that's sort of very deep and very universal. The title I had was Between You and Me, but basically it just talks about the fact that it's very difficult for us, whoever we are, to experience the other, like to see from the other's perspective. There's no man's land between your land and mine, no common ground where we can meet, no public property where we can greet and say hello. There's no common door between your room and mine, no gaping hole we can peer through, no folding screen we can pull back to say hello. There's no open road between your town and mine, no clear freeway we can drive over, no broad highway we can turn onto to say hello. There's no solid bridge between your bank and mine, no steel structure we can cross over, no rope ladder we can extend to say hello. each on Earth's lonely island, sharing the common sun, the worldwide cloud, the universal rain. We send no messages, we receive none. There's no common bond between your soul and mine. For the sake of, all of us as human beings, I wish that there could be a way of communication, because I look online at the news reports and I'm just absolutely aghast, and I feel so useless. And just expressing that, there's such a tremendous gaping space that we'd all like to cross in order that we can avoid destroying ourselves and one another. And so, like you've all expressed during the course of this session, we all feel impelled to do whatever we can, even if we are not perfectly sure that it will move the needle. But I'm happy that we all keep trying, because we must. Thank you.
Thank you, and I will say this very proudly. That was my mom. So thank you, Mom. Thank you, Hyacinth. Xanthi Andrew Hill is an award-winning Greek poetess who was born in Germany and studied German and English literature, linguistics, journalism, and public relations management in Germany. She has worked as a public relations manager at the Greek consulate in Stuttgart and as a German, Greek, and English teacher. She's a professional translator. She's gained international recognition during the pandemic. Her poems have been published in many prestigious international media and anthologies around the world. In 2022, she won the first prize of the Ugandan Global Harmony Association. And in 2023, she earned the Rockport Poetry Festival Award. In 2023, she was awarded an honorary doctorate by CIESART in Madrid. She is the founder and director of the International Poetry Festival in Naousa. Xanthi Andrew Hill.
Thank you very much. It gives me great pleasure to be here with you and to share, because there's very little we can do from our couches to actually help. I will read first a poem which is called Pray for Peace, although I don't think you can pray, so that tells you a lot. Pray for peace. The words of love under the trees are peace. From Yanis Ritsos, one of the great poets of the last century in Greece. Pray for peace. Pray for your father to return in the evening with a smile in his eyes and a basket filled with fruits. Pray for peace so that the wounds of the world will be healed and we can start planting trees again in the spots where the bombs left open wounds. Pray for peace so that the noise in the sky is just thunder and the storm will bring rain and water our hopes. Pray for peace. Pray for the party in the backyard where the children will smile in the sunset and dream of their future. Praying for peace is reaching and holding tight the hands of the neighbors. It's the warm food on the table of the globe, every mother's smile at the playground. Praying for peace is understanding that the world is one and it belongs to everyone equally. Pardon my tears. So, the next one I will read is No More Counting Stars. I contributed 5 poems to this. So No More Counting Stars is a little bit, it comes on a light rhythm, but it is, might be heavy on the soul. No more counting stars. The lights are bright in Gaza. They're falling from the sky. No one is asking why. The world is home and watching. Nobody's standing by. The lights are low in Gaza. The children went to sleep. Fathers counting bodies. Mothers will only weep. The light's gone out in Gaza. Just poets sit and cry, for no child will ever look up to the night sky. We want the children playing out in the streets at night. No more fighting wars. We want them counting stars. The lights gone out in Gaza. The children joined the stars and writing on the night sky a chant of ancient chants. No more wars. No more wars. No more wars. And I think this is the last one I will read. Yeah. Seeds of Peace. This is the one which was awarded by the Gandhian Global Harmony Association with the first prize. In the ceasefires, I planted the 4 corners of the horizon where the blood of my brothers blackens in the sun, seeds of peace. In the ceasefires, I light candles to light the paths of the spirit traced and lived by Gandhi. In the ceasefires, I open the door to strangers to come and share bread, water, roses. In the ceasefires, I build with my hands the dreams of children of the whole world. In the ceasefires, I touch the hearts of those around me to erase the pain of the past, to join together, to become a circle, to become dance, joy, song. In the ceasefires, I plant seeds of my lyrics to speak in the tongues of the world, to become an eternal hymn for peace. Thank you. I can't read anymore.
Thank you very much, Santhi. I think that those poems of yours speak for themselves. Very, very powerful. And you know, at a moment where the news from Palestine is, every newscast is a devastating one. So when coming onto Carleton campus this morning, I heard the news. The UN is reporting that if food is not delivered, if aid is not delivered to Palestine in the next number of hours, that some 14,000 babies could die in the next 48 hours, they're reporting. Now, that's the latest news. That's on top of day after day of bombings of so-called safe zones that we're seeing, in which hundreds seem to be dying each and every day.
At the same time, journalists who are there, just this is one part of one poem, is they're painting the pain on the screens in orange for $335 a picture. This is, somebody is making money out of it, and this is the most tragic we have to take out of Gaza. Somebody is making money out of that. That is tragic. That is really tragic.
I just wanted to say that in this moment, we began, maybe I began by talking about words, but we've learned over this last 90 minutes of what words can do. Words can allow us to see the world in a different way. Words can be a bomb. Words can help us to mine our own interiors, and words can help us to help to bring us together in community and be in solidarity with one another. So I wanted to thank all the organizers of today's event. One person who was not thanked, someone who is a real warrior, is one Blair Rutherford, who's off camera. But Blair is a professor of anthropology here at Carleton University and is always someone who is always there. So Blair, thank you for your work. And of course, I'm going to also thank Molly Kane, Feroz Manji's better half. We know that very much, better half, who is always contributes mightily to these events. Might not get recognized, but we know is certainly part of this foundation. And so I think I'm just going to end, and I'll give you the last word, Feroz.
Thank you. I think a round of applause for Adrian. Yeah. Means a lot to me, but especially and much more than just you coming, to have your mum here too. So thank you for coming. I do think that what these amazing poets who have spoken today have shown something we often don't give sufficient acknowledgement to, because it isn't just words, it's the heart and the soul. And I think all of us have felt those tears rising, felt the emotions that have arisen, and allow our souls to be unsilenced. And I think that's a real tribute to these amazing poets to whom I'd like to express deep gratitude, and to all of you for coming today. Thank you. That was the book launch for Unsilenced, Poems for Palestine, published by Daraja Press. You can find it along with other important books on our website at darajapress.com. This episode was produced by Pierre Loisel, music by Arlo Maverick, and thank you for listening.